Lonely grandmother struggles to celebrate Christmas alone. Barron Trump's visit will melt your heart. Barron held the small candle in his hand, his gaze steady and contemplative as the flickering flame danced, casting its light on the aged items lining the mantel. "May I light it?" he asked, his voice low and gentle, breaking the silence of the room. Charlotte stood beside him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, yet she nodded, speechless. The flame ignited, its soft light spreading through the room, filling it with an unexpected warmth. She gazed at Barron, a young man from a world so different from hers, and whispered, "He will like you." She couldn't fathom it. A young man, so far removed from her own life, had chosen to enter her solitary world on this cold Christmas night. But sometimes, even the smallest of lights, like a candle's flame, can ignite hope in the loneliest of hearts. Have you ever experienced a moment that warmed your heart the way Charlotte's did? If this story has touched you, share it and help spread the message of love and connection. The story begins when Charlotte sat in the dimly lit living room, the soft glow of a candle flickering, casting shadows on the walls. The Christmas tree stood in the corner of the room, adorned with old decorations from many decades past, silently testifying to better days. Outside, the snow gently fell, blanketing the world in pristine white, yet inside, Charlotte's heart weighed heavy. She looked at the empty chair across from her, where her late husband used to sit, his laughter now just an echo in the silent house. The room, once filled with voices and warmth, was now empty. Her grown children were far away, each busy with their own families, unable to visit her this year. Charlotte sighed, accepting that another Christmas would be spent alone. She walked to the kitchen, preparing a simple meal, a bowl of soup and a slice of old bread. As she ate, memories of joyful holidays flooded her mind, her husband carving the turkey, the children ripping through presents, the warmth of family filling the room. Now, all that remained was the echo. Suddenly, a sharp knock broke the silence of the house. Charlotte froze, her heart racing. Who could be visiting on Christmas Eve? She hesitated, curious yet filled with doubt, as she opened the door. Before her stood a tall young man, taller than anyone she had ever seen. The figure before her was none other than Barron Trump. Charlotte blinked, unable to believe her eyes, her hand trembling as she grasped the doorknob. She recognized him immediately from the news, his tall, graceful stature, with a presence almost unfamiliar at her snow-covered doorstep. "Good evening, ma'am," he said softly, his warm and pleasant voice breaking the quiet. Behind him, two black SUVs were discreetly parked by the curb, their engines running quietly. Charlotte noticed two stone-faced bodyguards standing nearby, scanning the empty street. "You must have the wrong house," Charlotte stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "No, ma'am," Barron replied, his smile unwavering. "I came to visit someone who might need a little company tonight. May I come in?" Charlotte hesitated, her mind spinning. Why had he come here? How did he find her? She glanced at the bodyguards, who nodded reassuringly. There was something in his calm demeanor that put her at ease, and she stepped aside to let him in. "Thank you," Barron said, stepping inside and removing his coat. The warmth of the house seemed to embrace him, and in that moment, Charlotte felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, her voice now steadier. "I'd love some," he replied as she hurried to the kitchen. Her mind was full of questions. Who was this man, and why had he chosen to visit her? The two sat at Charlotte's modest dining table, steam rising from their cups of tea. Barron's presence was captivating, his calmness contagious. Charlotte studied him carefully, still unsure if this was all some kind of dream. "Why did you come here?" she finally asked, her curiosity overcoming her fear. Barron leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "I wanted to spend Christmas with someone who might need some companionship," he said simply. "I heard about you from an acquaintance." "What about?" Charlotte asked, surprised. "I'm just an old woman, I have nothing to offer you." He shook his head. "You have more than you think. Sometimes just having someone there is the greatest gift." Tears welled up in Charlotte's eyes, and she quickly wiped them away with a napkin. She had never felt truly seen, truly understood, in many years. Barron looked around the room, his gaze settling on the old decorations. On the tree. These decorations are beautiful, he said, standing up to admire them. They're from when my children were small, Charlotte whispered. They don't visit much. Barron turned back to her, his eyes filled with empathy. Then tonight we'll make new memories, he said. Charlotte felt her heart stir with something she hadn't touched in a long time, the warmth of connection. She hesitated as she opened the pantry, the shelves now filled with only the bare essentials. She glanced at Barron, feeling a bit awkward. I didn't expect any guests, she admitted softly. Barron smiled, his presence a quiet comfort. Everything you do will be perfect, he reassured her, his voice gentle but full of understanding. Charlotte took a deep breath and began preparing the meal. She reheated a can of tomato soup and boiled some pasta, plating the simple meal on her best dishes. Barron was insistent on helping, despite her polite refusals. I've never had a famous person like you in my kitchen, she laughed nervously. Well, I've never had tomato soup in such a cozy home, Barron replied with a smile, making Charlotte laugh along with him. As they sat down to eat, the atmosphere became warm and easy. Charlotte found herself laughing loudly at Barron's stories. Each tale was light-hearted but filled with kindness and genuine care. He wasn't the cold figure Charlotte had imagined. He was sincere, thoughtful, and always paying attention to the smallest details. You remind me of my grandson, Charlotte confessed, her voice tinged with emotion. Barron gently placed his hand on hers, his touch tender. And you remind me of my grandmother, whom I miss dearly. For the first time in years, Charlotte felt her heart feel full. As they cleaned up the dishes, Charlotte could no longer hold back her curiosity. Why are you really here, Barron? Charlotte asked, her voice soft but determined. He paused, his expression turning more contemplative. It's a long story, Barron admitted. I have all night, Charlotte replied warmly, her invitation clear. Barron leaned against the kitchen counter, his tall frame seeming smaller under the weight of his thoughts. I've been given so much, he began, but sometimes I feel lonely. The world sees me as a symbol, not as a person. I want to connect with someone real, someone who can remind me of what truly matters. Charlotte listened intently, her heart aching for this young man who carried such a heavy burden. And you chose me? She whispered, tears beginning to well up. Barron nodded gently, his voice trembling. You remind me of my grandmother, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She taught me that Christmas is about love and connection, not the glitz. I thought maybe she could teach me that again. Tears fell from Charlotte's eyes, but this time, they were tears of gratitude. Do you have a star for the tree? Barron asked, his eyes drifting toward the top of Charlotte's Christmas. She shook her head, smiling sadly. I haven't placed a star on the tree in years. Then tonight, that will change, Barron declared, pulling out his phone. After a few whispered words to the bodyguards, one of them returned with a sparkling golden star wrapped in soft tissue paper. Charlotte nearly gasped. You didn't have to do this. But I want to, Barron said, handing her the star. This tree deserves to shine. Together, they carefully placed the star on the highest branch of the tree. As they stepped back to admire their work, Charlotte's living room seemed transformed. The tree sparkled, the golden star casting a warm light that filled the room. Perfect, Charlotte whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Barron turned back to her, his eyes bright. Perfect because you are wonderful, he said sincerely. For the first time in many years, Charlotte felt truly cherished. Her home was filled with a magic she thought had been lost forever. After the tree had come alive with its glow, Charlotte sat at her dusty piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. I haven't played in a long time, she murmured. Barron's eyes lit up. Could you play a song for me? Charlotte hesitated but then nodded. She began with a shaky rendition of Silent Night, her fingers stumbling at first, but the melody gradually flowed, filling the space with gentle beauty. Barron closed his eyes, gently swaying to the rhythm. When Charlotte finished, she looked up, expecting polite applause, but instead, she saw tears rolling down his face. My grandmother used to play this for me, he said, his voice barely a whisper. It was her favorite song. Charlotte felt a lump rise in her throat. Music has a way of connecting hearts, she said softly, even hearts that have been lost. Barron stood up, and to Charlotte's surprise, he began humming along to the melody. His voice was deep and warm, adding a rich layer to the song, and immediately, Charlotte joined in. Their voices blended into a harmonious melody, and in that moment, the room seemed to contain more than just the two of them. It felt as if the spirits of loved ones were present, their warmth surrounding them like a soft, comforting blanket. "Let's go outside," Barron suddenly suggested, his excitement catching Charlotte off guard. "To play in the snow?" she asked, laughing loudly. "Exactly, we'll make snow angels," he said, already pulling on his coat. Charlotte hesitated for a moment, but then decided to follow his spontaneous lead. They stepped outside, the cold night air enveloping them as the snow crunched beneath their feet. The quiet neighborhood was bathed in moonlight, and the air was filled with the stillness of Christmas Eve. Barron collapsed into the snow, flailing his arms and legs to create a snow angel. Charlotte watched him, laughing as she hadn't laughed in years. "Your turn," he called out. "Oh, I haven't done this since I was a child," she protested, but he laughed brightly and helped her lie down in the snow. As she waved her arms and legs, the cold snow melted on her coat, and Charlotte felt a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in many years. Standing up and seeing her snow angel next to Barron's, her eyes welled with tears. "You know," she said, her voice choking, "I think this is the happiest Christmas I've had in years." Barron smiled. "And it's just getting started." Back inside, Barron noticed a small candle flickering low on Charlotte's mantel. "What's this?" he asked. Charlotte's face softened. "It's my husband's favorite candle. He used to light it every Christmas Eve and pray for our family." Barron carefully took the candle in his hands, his expression becoming reverent. "Would it be all right if I light it for him tonight?" Charlotte nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks as Barron lit the candle. The room seemed to brighten, the flame dancing on the walls. They stood in silence, watching as the small flame flickered, its light filling the room with warmth. "Shall we pray?" Barron suggested, his voice low. Charlotte clasped her hands together, her heart full of gratitude. Together, they prayed not only for her late husband but for all their loved ones who couldn't be there, for the lonely, and for the world to be filled with moments like this. After the prayer, Charlotte whispered, "I think he would have liked you." Barron smiled gently. "I think I would have liked him too." The candle burned brighter, as if carrying their prayer to the heavens. A soft knock on the door interrupted the peaceful moment. One of the bodyguards entered, holding several carefully wrapped boxes. "Mr. Trump, your request," he said. Charlotte looked on in surprise as Barron opened the boxes, revealing a feast of luxury: roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and a decadent chocolate cake. "What's all this?" Charlotte asked, her voice filled with astonishment. "I thought we could have a proper Christmas dinner," Barron replied, smiling brightly. "And no, you're not allowed to refuse." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears as they set the table together. The aromas of the meal filled her home, blending with the soft glow of the candles. As they ate, Charlotte found herself sharing stories about her late husband and the Christmas traditions she had once cherished. Barron listened intently, asking questions and laughing at her anecdotes. "This is the best meal I've had in a long time," Charlotte admitted, her voice trembling with emotion. Barron raised his glass of apple cider. "To new traditions and unexpected friendships," he toasted. "To the magic of Christmas," Charlotte added, clinking her glass against his. After dinner, Barron pulled a small, carefully wrapped gift from his jacket pocket. "This is for you," he said, handing it to Charlotte. "For me!" Charlotte exclaimed, her hand trembling as she received the gift. "But I haven't prepared anything for you," she added, her voice filled with surprise. "You've given me more than I could ever ask for," Barron replied gently. Carefully, Charlotte unwrapped the gift, revealing a beautifully framed photograph. This was no ordinary photo. It was an exquisitely detailed image of the snow-covered Christmas village, her hometown. The streets glowed with sparkling lights, and the church tower stretched toward the sky. How did you?" Charlotte stammered, her voice thick with emotion. I did a little research, Barron admitted, a shy smile crossing his face. I wanted you to have a piece of your homeland. Charlotte clutched the photo to her chest, tears streaming down her face. This is the most thoughtful gift I've ever received, she whispered. It's a reminder, Barron said softly, that no matter where life takes us, our home is always in our hearts. Charlotte felt a warmth she had never experienced from any gift before. It was a reminder of love, connection, and belonging. As the night deepened, Barron noticed an old record player in the corner of Charlotte's living room. Does this still work? He asked, pointing to the player. I think so, Charlotte replied. But I haven't used it in years. Barron walked over, carefully examining the stack of records beside it. He selected one and placed it on the turntable. Within moments, the soothing melody of a classic Christmas song filled the room. May I have this dance? Barron asked, extending his hand. Charlotte laughed, her cheeks flushed. Oh, I haven't danced in decades. There's no better time than now, he said, taking her hand and gently leading her to the center of the room. They danced slowly, the music surrounding them like a warm embrace. Charlotte felt the years slip away as she swayed to the rhythm, memories of dancing with her late husband flooding her mind. You dance so naturally, Barron said, his voice full of admiration. And you're quite the charmer yourself, Charlotte replied, smiling through her tears. As the song ended, she held Barron's hand tightly and whispered, Thank you for making this the most magical Christmas I've ever had. As the music faded, Charlotte sat back down in her chair, her hands resting on her lap. The joy of the evening made her feel as though her heart might burst. Barron sat across from her, his calm presence grounding her amidst her swirling emotions. Do you ever miss the simpler times? She asked suddenly, her voice soft. Barron nodded. Every day. Sometimes I wish I could escape the noise and just be an ordinary person. Charlotte tilted her head, studying him closely. You're not ordinary, Barron. But you're also just a young man searching for meaning, like all of us. He smiled at her words, his gaze drifting to the glowing Christmas tree. Tonight feels different. It feels real, like I've found something I didn't know I needed. Charlotte reached out gently to touch his hand. Sometimes life gives us gifts we never expect. I think that's the true spirit of Christmas. In that moment, they sat in silence, the room bathed in the warm golden light from the tree. It wasn't the silence of loneliness but the silence of peace, a rare shared moment that transcended the differences in their lives. The sound of a phone ringing broke the quiet. Barron pulled the phone from his pocket and glanced at the screen. My mom's calling, he said, standing up. I need to take this. Charlotte nodded, giving him the space he needed. As he stepped outside, she could hear the faint sound of his voice, steady and calm, though the conversation seemed serious. When he returned, his face was thoughtful. Is everything okay? Charlotte asked. Barron nodded. She just called to check in. I told her about tonight about you. Charlotte looked at him in surprise. You told her? Yeah, he replied, sitting down. She said it sounded like the perfect way to spend Christmas. Charlotte smiled, her heart warming at the thought. You're lucky to have someone who cares about you like that. Barron hesitated for a moment, then said, You remind me of my mother in a few ways. Strong, kind, and with a heart big enough to carry the burdens of others. Charlotte felt tears welling up in her eyes again. You remind me of the child I've always prayed for, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Barron's eyes lit up, but he said nothing. Some words were unnecessary. Shall we take a walk? Barron suggested, breaking the silence. The snow is beautiful. Charlotte hesitated for a moment before nodding, wrapping a thick scarf around her neck. The two of them stepped outside, the quiet snow-covered night surrounding them. The street was deserted, and the whole world seemed to be immersed in a peaceful stillness. They walked side by side, their breaths mingling in small clouds in the cold air. Barron pointed to the twinkling lights on the houses as Charlotte told him stories of the neighbors and the Christmas traditions that once filled her street. Do you think Christmas will ever be like it was? She asked, her voice tinged with nostalgia. I think it already is, Barron replied with a smile. not by recreating the past, but by finding joy in the present. As they walked, Charlotte draped her arm through Barron's, seeking steadiness on the snow-covered sidewalk. She felt a profound sense of safety, as if the universe had placed him at her doorstep for a reason. When they returned home, Charlotte realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. She was no longer afraid of loneliness. Just as Charlotte and Barron stepped back into the warmth of the house, there was a knock at the door. Charlotte furrowed her brow, confused. Who could be visiting at this hour? She wondered aloud. Barron glanced at the guard, who quietly opened the door. A middle-aged woman, draped in a luxurious coat, her golden hair glowing under the soft porch light, stepped inside. "Mom!" Barron exclaimed, his voice full of surprise. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat as Melania Trump entered, her expression both gentle and curious. "My son has told me so much about you over the phone," Melania said, offering a warm smile and extending her hand. Charlotte stammered, her voice trembling. "It's just Charlotte, please come in." As Melania entered, her presence filled the room, but instead of feeling out of place, she naturally blended into the cozy space. Barron explained to his mother how he had ended up at Charlotte's home by chance, recounting the shared stories and magical moments of Christmas Eve. "You've given my son a gift," Melania said, her gaze fixed on Charlotte. "A gift of kindness and warmth, one he will never forget." Charlotte, overwhelmed with emotion, could only nod, feeling as though her world was expanding in a way she never imagined. As the three of them sat together, Melania's guards brought in a few more gift packages. "We couldn't let you leave without opening these," Melania said with a smile. Charlotte hesitated, unsure how to respond, but Barron encouraged her, "Go ahead, open them." The first gift was a hand-knitted blanket, soft and intricately patterned, like delicate snowflakes. "It's beautiful," Charlotte whispered, her hand grazing the fine stitches. The second gift surprised her even more, a handwritten card from Barron. Charlotte opened it and read aloud, "Thank you for showing me the true meaning of Christmas. You've given me a memory I will always treasure. Sincerely, Barron." Charlotte's hands trembled as she folded the card, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You've given me more than I could ever give back," she choked out. Melania gently took Charlotte's hand. "You reminded us what Christmas is really about. It's love, family, and the beauty of human connection." For the first time in decades, Charlotte felt she belonged to something greater than herself. As the clock struck midnight, Charlotte realized Christmas Day was nearly over, but her heart was fuller than it had ever been. Barron and Melania stood up, the guards waiting by the door. "Will you be okay?" Barron asked, his gaze filled with concern. Charlotte smiled, the wrinkles on her face deepening with joy. "I'll be better than ever. You've made this the best Christmas of my life." Barron gently embraced her, the gratitude in his hug palpable. Melania followed, her warmth mirroring that of her son. "We'll visit again," she promised softly before stepping out into the snow. Charlotte stood by the door, watching their figures fade into the night. She turned back to the Christmas tree, its vibrant lights shining brighter than ever, the golden star on top glowing with unmatched brilliance. "I'm not alone anymore," she whispered to herself, "not anymore." That night, as she lay in bed, Charlotte held Barron's card tightly in her hand and smiled, her heart filled with hope and joy. She realized that the spirit of Christmas wasn't in the gifts or the grandeur, but in the love that brought people together. Charlotte and Barron's story is a testament to the power of connection, kindness, and the true meaning of Christmas. Have you ever experienced a moment that made you realize the value of love and sharing? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story could inspire and bring joy to others. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to share it with friends and family to help spread the message of love and connection. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.